So, some interesting stuff happened this morning, and I just love it. So, yesterday I was showing my youngest son a little what's called bibliomancy, a fun bit of divination you can do. It's similar to drawing a card, is that you can pick any book that you want and hold the book, imagine what you want, the information that you want, or if you want to know about something that might happen during the day, just for the magic of the of affirming if it was there, then close your eyes, open to a page, put your finger on a page, and read the sentence that's there, or the word that is there, or the paragraph that is there, and then just see if it happens, right? That's great too because when I showed him this, like it did happen. In any case, so I decided I would take the same book that I used. Like he used a book that was more for his age. I picked this one, which is the Book of Unusual Knowledge. And it says it took about 30 million hours for Stone Age workers to build Stonehenge. So stuff, it's a book of not obscure facts, but just different facts. And it's been one of my favorites for a while for this, but I do admit I haven't been letting myself enjoy little magics like this quite as much. But it felt like when I opened it today, so two things happened that made me go, okay, this is something that's for others also. Is that I got a new deck, the Oracle of Ascendance, and it's great. I'm glad that I went and found it. It's already more alive than the other decks that I have. It's delightful, and some of the cards decided to separate themselves and end up on the floor, but in a very odd way. And I was like, oh, you know what? I'll look at those cards in a little bit, and maybe that'll be a reading, or maybe that'll answer something for me later. But then I decided first that I would look in the book and do a little bit of bibliomancy. Now, what's interesting is two things happened. The first was that the first page that I opened to, I literally only saw one sentence: if you build it, they will come. And then the page immediately flipped over to another page, and I have not been able to find that page again to see what the article was about. So to me, that's a clear message of that's what you were supposed to see, just that little piece. And it reminds me of, an earlier point in my light work journey where that was one of the messages that Spirit communicated to me to help me with my own journey and connecting with my DM. And I was like, oh wow, what a trip to realize I forgot about that, because that was a really big thing, and it's part of what called me in to do my channel. And I can actually remember, yeah, it was one of the earlier videos when Divine Maverick was doing, talking about, for those of you who feel called to get out and do channels and stuff, go out and do it. And it was at the same time I was getting all these synchronicities of Field of Dreams and if you build it, they will come. And that was part of why I keep my stuff also at donation only, like all my services, because it was meant to be different and to be more magical in that sort of way. And just it's something like karma wise for me to explore. And so I'm going, okay, this is great. So we're backwards forwarding into that energy in the time grid. And so then the page that I opened, it was funny. So I was looking for the page that had said, if you build it, they will come. And as I was going along, different pages were popping up with different messages, and I pulled the cards that had fallen out, and I just meant to put like one or two little bookmarks. And then I went, no, I'm supposed to do this. And by the time I got to a space where I was already like, I'm not going to look anymore, clearly I was not meant to read the rest of it just yet, I realized I had put all the cards that had fallen out of the deck into the spaces of those, and all of them were interesting, relatable messages that I know are going to, somebody's going to go, yeah, that's mine, or many of them are mine, and then ended up pulling two extra from the deck, and they were very fitting towards other things going on. So I want to show you what the cards were and show you what the pages were that I felt called to put these cards in, and we'll just see where that goes. And I would love, if you feel like participating, for you to comment, especially in the comments below, once the video is fed. And you can put them in the chat here now too if you want, but I would love to see how many of these syncs, like, people are like, yes, I've been seeing that, or yes, that's personal to me, or if it's later, like you listen to this and something happens later that it gets pulled in, like, this will be awesome. So the first card, and I loved it because it was one of the ones I saw when the deck fell when I saw the cards is Capricorn, because that's my sun sign and my Venus sign. And Capricorn is the social architect, you know. It's also one of the only signs that the glyph is intended to show evolution from being a fish to being a mountain goat to climbing up to the top of the mountain. And where I felt called to stop in the book was where it said semi-truths and coincidence. And what it's about is it's the Lincoln Kennedy debates. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to give you the pieces that feel relevant. Honest Abe truths. Lincoln and Kennedy were elected to Congress 100 years apart. They were also elected to presidency 100 years apart and had successors who were born 100 years apart. And then in the semi-truths, that first one that was there, it says, both first ladies lost children while in the White House. A fact, although this is technically true, the situations were quite different. The Kennedys' child died a few days after a premature birth, and two older children, a boy or girl, survived to adulthood. The Lincolns lost an 11-year-old son to typhoid while they were in the White House. They had 3 other sons, 2 of whom died before they reached adulthood. And so, I know how that's likely relevant in my own dynamic and stuff, though, you know, that might be relevant to you. Any part of that might be. This is why I'd love the comments, because it's like, how are each of these things relevant to you? The next one that I felt called to was a page that said, we've got a secret, and right above it, the painful truth. And it was matched to the Venus card. I haven't even really looked and seen what all these cards were that was in there. Venus right now is in Scorpio, so both secrets and painful truths make sense. Hello, Lolita. And like that Venusian energy in there, that Empress energy in there, and its title is, let's see, Cleveland's Secret Cancer. President Grover Cleveland was known as Grover the Good. I'm also getting a Sesame Street sync for his honesty. However, there was one time when Cleveland was not very forthcoming, and we can see that both of these stories are about truths, perception, perspective, kind of hangman stuff. Now, let's look at just the sentences just right below each of these. Hello, 69 girl. So we've got a secret. But having surgery wasn't that easy. With the economy on the skids, the country jittery, and pro-silver vice president Adlai Stevenson, Cleveland did not want to further upset the nation by announcing his health was at risk, so he ordered his condition be kept secret from the public. That could be a reference to something going on with some DMs or somebody that they are, you know, entangled with, maybe a third party. The painful truth, the paragraph right beneath that, in 1893, maybe that's relevant historically for you, Cleveland had recently returned to the White House, this time as the country's 24th president. America had just entered a national economic depression, the Panic of 1893, to help the economy recover. Cleveland wanted to repeal the Sherman Silver Purchase Act and maintain the gold standard. That was one, it's funny, there was some other videos, I don't even know which ones because I talk about it often, about the cycles, and this was one that I listed, and you know, after it, the Great Depression. This is a similar astrological alignment we're in, and clearly we can see what's going on around. And also it touches to the gold standard, and gold has been a sync that's been coming up a lot. Hello, High Priestess. Yeah, yes, you hear it coming. The next one was the sacral chakra in reverse. And this card got lined up with what I saw was polygamy problems. And what's funny is the section above it is called Secrets from the Soil, and the one after it is The Promised Island. And we can see a consistency of these syncs in the bibliomancy and the cards here, right? Sacral chakra, when it's out of balance, can be, there's a lot of low vibe secret energy going on. It blocks creativity and things like that. And polygamy, which is different from polyamory, has had its own sordid dramas throughout various different cultures too. You know, and in some places it's really revered and they really love it, and other places it's, you know, it's I want to say overly intellectualized, and some places it becomes cultish. Like there's so many different things to that energy, and I know that a fair amount of DMs and DFs have been in sort of Agatha Christie novel sort of karmic learning lessons, and it kind of feels like a polygamy sort of situation, or an what is it, androgamy situation. So it'd be like, androgamy is like one woman or feminine and many masculines, and the polygamy is one masculine and many feminines. And So it was interesting to me to see that pop up. And it feels like it's related to the sacral chakra card in that sense too, that it can be very draining if it's not benevolent or positive, or if it stagnates. Anything that stagnates, think about a plant. If it doesn't get enough wind, water, air, and nutrients from the soil, it stagnates and it dies, right? And so let's see the sentence right, or the paragraph right below the part in the book. Polygamy problems. Strang had personal reasons for getting divine approval to have multiple wives. I love it when spirit does that, like using a specific word that you're like, yeah, that's not coincidental. In July 1849, a 19-year-old woman named Elvira Field secretly became Strang's second wife. There was just one problem. He hadn't divorced his first one. Soon, Field began traveling with him, posing as a young man named Charlie Douglas, with her hair cut short and wearing a man's black suit. Yet the clever disguise did little to hide Field's ample figure. I'm going to read the rest of this paragraph. It's relevant for me in several ways and might be for you. So, at about that time, Strang claimed that another angel told him it was time to get out of Vori. Strang was to lead his people to a land surrounded by water and covered in timber. This land, according to Strang, was Beaver Island, the largest of a group of islands in the Beaver archipelago, archipelago north of these are I don't of Charlevoix, Michigan. I was gonna say, oh, these are French locations, and then I went Michigan. Like, what's going on there? It said it had recently been open to settlement, and the Strangites or Strangites, I don't know, Strangites moved there in the late 1840s. You know what's weird? I've never heard of Strangites, and I'm not sure what that's about. Let's see. I'm looking at it. Says that the opening thing is politics. America's only king. Oh wow. Okay. Few people believe that a separate empire with its own king once existed within the United States of America, but James Jesse Strang was indeed crowned ruler of a Lake Michigan island kingdom. Wow. Okay. Growing the garden. He moved to Wisconsin with his wife Mary. They bought a parcel of land, become the city of Burlington, which is funny. We have a Burlington in Washington, so and that's relevant to things that go on with me, both light work wise and with my DMs. So see what I mean? Like, and you have lots of books around you that you could do this bibliomancy with and get more specific syncs. Now let's see. Strang met a Mormon prophet, Joseph Smith, and on way to Illinois. Illinois is where my DM was born. Smith immediately appointed him elder of the faith, authorized him to start a Mormon stake, which meant Garden of Peace. I'm just like pulling out what looks relevant so we don't spend a bunch of time here. Mormons from around flocked there to build new homes, forced to track in the White River, and Strang became a Mormon. Smith was killed. Strang produced a letter naming him as the church's next prophet, which appeared to have been written and signed by Smith. Somebody else claimed the title. Young eventually won, and Strang broke away to form his own branch of Mormonism. That must be the controversial stuff, the polygamy stuff I've not heard. I don't know the details of it, but it's in there. Let's see, September 1848. Isn't that funny? What month are we in right now? Still September. Strang made announcement: a divine revelation had told him to dig under an oak tree in Vori location on a low rise called the Hill of Promise. Armed with shovels, four followers unearthed a box that contained some small brass plates, each only a few inches tall. The plates were covered with hieroglyphics. There's another Egyptian sync. Crude drawings of the White River settlement area, and a vaguely Native American human figure holding a scepter. Which, it's when I got into reading this, I realized too that a lot of these were the same Mormons that promoted residential schools, and I know a few people that were actually taken by them, a few indigenous Americans, and it was not good. So that makes sense in terms of collective energies, and there's stuff in my personal journey, both light work wise, twin flame wise, and otherwise that connect to this stuff. So let's see. Translated the plates in New York, location syncs. The writing Strang said was from a lost tribe of Israel that had made it to North America. I just feel like there's something very not accurate in all of that. He created subgroups. There was a commune called the Order of Enoch, which I believe I've heard of that. As well as the secretive Illuminati. Wow, what a sync. I know some of you have heard that term over the last like 10 years. Let's see, who pledged their allegiance to Strang as sovereign lord and king on earth. Infighting developed in the ranks. Area non-Mormons raised objections. He received his second divine message called Plates of Laban, which he said were originally in the Ark of the Covenant. They contained instructions in the book of the law of the Lord, translated through stones. The plates were not shown to the group at the time, but they did eventually yield support, some would say rather conveniently, for the controversial practice of polygamy. So I'm not going to continue on reading the rest of that. If you feel called to read about that story, there could be karmic connections in terms of your lineage or ancestors or somebody you know, or in some way there might be a connection in there, or it could have just been like the more literal data, times, seasons, locations, names, things like that. You know it by the way you feel. The next one was Aquarius. And Aquarius is Hierophant energy. It's also the world card. And it's, for me, how do you put it? Like Aquarians, I have yet to meet more than two typical types of Aquarians. Was it Illinois is supposed to be ancient Egypt, and the Mississippi River is the Nile River? Okay, interesting. I might look into that. I actually love the study of ancient Egyptology, so I'm not sure that in my timeline reality that I want the Nile River to be in the Mississippi, or to be the Mississippi, though. I don't know. I might explore it. I'm also realizing, too, if you look into the history of the Twin Flame journey, there was a period in time when Mormons took over a lot of it and tried to, like, change the narrative to it being like there's only, I can't even remember, it's like 441,000 twin flames, and there's a new planet that they might go to, and there's only a limited number, and you have to meet certain like Mormon requirements. And that's not my yum. And in my timeline, I would yuck on that a little bit, but I'm not going to do it here because someone else might like that path. And okay, as long as you're not hurting anybody, okay. It just, yeah. Sorry, not Mississippi. Well, you did say Mississippi. Where did Mississippi go through Illinois? I don't know. I'm going to look at that because I know that I could see, I feel like in my mind it's like going, it could, even the ancient Egyptologists talked about how the Nile moved. And so it's very possible in my mind to see the connection of it either moving much further or also being connected in ways that we may not have known before. So, I don't know. That's cool. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Aquarians, what I was going to say is I've typically only met two types of Aquarians. There's the strictly logical Aquarians that go with empirical 3D evidence. And then there's Aquarians who will blow your fucking mind with the level of esoteric information that they have. And it's almost like it's like the Hierophant and the hippie. And I've met two that are a good balance in the middle, because both energies are supposed to be present and balanced. But the Aquarius is the water bearer in there, and it's definitely like we're supposedly in another age of Aquarius, astrologically speaking. And see, and so think about what those energies are in terms of how you feel about them, and then to the page that they're connected with. So what's funny, and I know someone who's probably going to giggle about this. I have to send her a picture later. What I put the page on was a name, and it's two names actually, two different people, but the second person doesn't watch YouTube. So it says Barbara Jane Mackle, and I don't know who that is, but when I looked up at the top of the page, it says Death and the Macabre, True Tales of Being Buried Alive. And so this one, I'm going to look at the paragraph under. It said, could there be anything more horrifying than a forced burial? Emory University student Barbara Jane Mackey suffered through such an ordeal and miraculously lived to tell the tale. Abducted from a motel room on December 17th, 1968, the 20-year-old daughter of business mogul Robert Mackle was whisked off to a remote location and buried under 18 inches of earth. I'm not going to read all of this, but I'm going to go, let's see. 80 hours after she was discovered in a wooded area around 20 miles northeast of Atlanta, which feels like a sync to Atlantis also. Not necessarily the location, but the word. Her light source, interesting, light work. Her light source had failed just a few hours after her burial. She was in a coffin, and they said they found her severely dehydrated but otherwise in good condition, and her kidnappers were eventually apprehended. It sounds to me like it's kind of a, wow, it's chapter 16 too. It's like aptly, like I'm going, whoo, what energy. It could be connected to the, maybe you have some ancestors that like with the residential school children being unearthed, and all of the different atrocities to indigenous tribes, like that could be something in your ancestral line or something to look into, or maybe the specific person, or think about it in a metaphorical way, how that could relate to you, and especially in terms of Aquarius energy, because it could be maybe something that, like, Aquarius is also the star card, so wishes manifested. So maybe there's something in there that will help you do your light work, especially with the light part in there. Now, the next card, the throat chakra. It's quite fitting considering that stuff going on. And it's amazing because this book is full of all sorts of knowledge. It's not just about secrets and stuff like that. So this is an interesting pattern that we're seeing come up here. Now, throat chakra is your truth center, the truth that you speak, the truth that you hear, things like that. It's connected to all sorts of communications and stuff like that. And what I had seen was a part on the page that said, not connected to other galaxies yet. And then when I looked at the top, it said the grandfather. What actually it is ARPANET, the grandfather of the internet. And this seems interesting. And I'm also seeing the word union a fair amount on this page. But let's just look at the one paragraph beneath what I saw. Not connected to other galaxies yet. The expert chosen to head ARPA's initial efforts was Joseph Licklider, which Joseph has appeared a couple of times in this book for different things, so maybe that's relevant for you. A leading computer scientist. Licklider envisioned, what a name, Licklider, envisioned a worldwide communications network connected by computers, which he referred to as the Intergalactic Computer Network. He departed ARPA in 1965 before his plan was implemented, but he left a lasting impression on his successor, Bob Taylor. Which, something came into my mind that was like, that's funny, the word imp. The internet is very relevant right now, and especially with all the mercurial energies as Mercury gets ready to go retrograde, but it feels very connected to the Atlantean energy coming in also, especially when you think about most of the internet, we use crystals, especially in smartphones, quartz crystals, to send out the signal and do things like that and create kinetic energy. It's very Atlantean if you look into it. The next one that I caught was the third eye, right? And it's interesting that, these cards clearly have different things on them, but we've got multiple chakras going on here. And third eye is your place where you see truth and you see into the other realms and into yourself and connect with spirit. It's your intuition and your knowing. And what I felt called to was a date. And it's in a footnotes of a story, and it said September 16th, 1979. And what do I want to look at? What is the story? That's funny. So technology and inventions, learning to fly, and when sheep fly. Let's just read the footnote. It says on September 16th, 1979, Peter Strzelik, Gunther Wetzel, their wives, and their 4 children dropped from the night sky onto a field in West Germany in a homemade hot air balloon. That's what it was. I did read that small part, and it reminded me of The Wizard of Oz, which I know that many of you recognize sinks going in and follow the yellow brick road and things like that. But also, when you think Eye of the Storm or The Storm is Over Now, like, what was in The Wizard of Oz. Anyways, it said Strzelik, an electrician, and Wetzel, a bricklayer, built the balloon's platform and burners in one of their basements. Their wives sewed together curtains, bed sheets, shower liners, and whatever other fabric was on hand to make the 75-foot high balloon. Their bid to escape communist East Germany during the days of the Iron Curtain was 2 years in the making, spanned 15 miles, and took 28 minutes to complete. Unsure whether they had reached freedom, the two families spent the next morning hiding in a barn until they saw an Audi driving down a nearby road and realized they had indeed made it to West Germany. So that's interesting. And think about that. That's also a recent thing that fits in with the current energies of stuff going on. Like, there are all sorts of times we get lined up with the same astrological energies, and that's part of why it's kind of fun to learn about astrology. But you could see a couple of different syncs in there, and I know September 16th, the day itself, is actually very synchronistic for me, and you might have synchronicity in there with it. The next one, or this was the last one of the cards that fell on their own. It's the Cauticus. And this is a very meaningful symbol for me for many reasons. It's typically used as the symbol or the sigil now for the medical industry and healing. And it was actually another name for it is Asclepius's staff. And it's older than that. It goes into Egyptian times, though in my mind the way I most prominently remember it because of a spiritual experience I had is to Asclepius. And it's the healer's symbol effectively, but there's also, I'm feeling called for those of you that want to look up the Celtic. There's the 7 realms, and I think the 13 realms are Norse, but I'm not 100% on that. But maybe look into it. That might be relevant. And what it was is I saw on the page the rule of 3. And in the reading that I did last night, there was the Triskel, the Trinity spirals, and that came up a few times before. And I talked about how the meaning of that is typically the triple goddess, but it's about threes and how we can see that also in, mainstream Christian secularism as the, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or I think it's Mary, Jesus, God. I don't know. I know there's many different ways in there, but it reminded me of that. And then it was funny because right below that, the rule of 3 to represent the Holy Trinity. Tresham designed the building with only 3 walls. The structure is itself a perfect equilateral triangle, with its walls meeting at 60-degree angles, glorifying the Holy Trinity via the rule of 3 is repeated and repeated and repeated throughout the building. Check this out. Okay, you're going to like it. For those of you that see 333 a lot, this is cool. Each of the 3 walls is 33.3 feet. Each floor of the 3-story building has 3 windows. Each wall has 3 gables. Each gable is 3 feet by 3 feet with 3-sided pinnacles. There are 9 gargoyles, 3 sets of 3. Friezes runs along the walls on each side of the building. Each contains a phrase written in Latin, and each phrase is exactly 33 letters. Though the main room on each floor is hexagonal in shape, if you draw 3 bisecting lines through a hexagon, you get 6 more equilateral triangles. And if all those 3s are making you a little dizzy, just wait. Tresham was far more content with a few triangular tricks. The building's ornaments were where Tresham spared no expense to work in secret codes for the glory of the Lord. This is funny. So that's Thomas Tresham tied triangles together. Nothing prompts a person to build a bizarre triangular stone lodge in the middle of nowhere, quite like religious persecution. At least that's how Sir Thomas Tresham felt back in 1593 when he began work on what would become the mysterious Rushton Triangular Lodge, a structure that he had hoped to be much more than a place to hang his hat. That's so interesting. So he's a Catholic in England, and he secretly builded it. secretly built it. But that's interesting. You see, like that's I couldn't make that up. I just saw the rule of three, and then we're talking about all that stuff in there, all that synchronicity, and you can see how things like that can be done intentionally. And I can only imagine, like, if you think about all the stuff that we don't know by what we do know about the ancient Egyptians, like, I mean, and even the stuff that came up, a lot of them, and even what's funny is here in America, all the oldest government buildings, they used astrology, sacred geometry, and masonry to make sure that they were all lined up at points of power and along ley lines. I mean, it is like you can look that up. Like, that's a thing that has been done for a long time. And that's an example right there, too. I feel like some of you might decide to do something in your lives in the energy of that, like maybe in threes or in twos or in sevens or something like that. And then the next one, which I pulled, as funny. I wasn't going to pull more cards. I didn't have the intention of it, but there was a couple more pages, and it was funny because one of them was Seattle, Washington, and what it was is I read the first sentence to it. It says, "You may think that Seattle was built on Microsoft, but it was actually built on mud." And this is a particular thing to me too because it's occupied Duwamish and Salish territory among other things, and I think it's pronounced Lummi or Lumi territories, and a lot of it's not talked about. It's being talked about more widely, but it made me think about it. And what's making me laugh now is on the other page, it says Rome, Italy. And I've been talking a lot about figuring out where Romulus and Remus came from because they're the ones that started Rome and brought, Anglo-Saxons in that created like race and all these other things that created imbalances of power and you name it. But what I laughed about is the card that came out when I was like, I'm going to mark this page. Saturn, which links back to the first card that came out, Capricorn, and also I am a Capricorn and ruled by Saturn, and a lot of this is karma stuff, including the stuff that came to my mind when I read that first sentence about Seattle, Washington. And so let's see, this says Seattle, Washington. You may think Seattle was built on Microsoft, but it was actually built on mud. In 1852, the first neighborhood of Seattle was settled in the area known today as Pioneer Square. Even though the builders brought in fill from surrounding areas, the city's sea level status still posed some problems. When the tide came in, the streets would fill with mud and toilets would turn into gushing fountains. Sounds pleasant. You would think, like, it's funny to think only white colonizer would be like, we can fix that, instead of, why don't we move? Like, why don't we not try to make the land be different for us. Anyways, in 1889, a fire destroyed the young city, and a new Seattle was built on top of the ashes of the old. The city planners knew that this was their chance to fix the mistakes of the past, so with the relief money they received, they built retaining walls on the sides of the existing streets, filled the space, and raised the streets 8 feet higher than they previously were. In effect, the first, that is, original floors of stores and homes became the underground. Today, humorous tours are available to those who are looking to explore Seattle's underside, which is true. It's called the Seattle Underground Tour, and I did not realize that's what it was. I did wonder for a while. I just assumed it was old, like, speakeasies or something like that, but it's no, like that makes sense, and it makes sense why those tours are called haunted tours too. I'm curious about what this thing says about Rome, Italy. Okay, so it says visitors to this ancient city are familiar with the typical haunts, the museums, the Colosseum, and the Pantheon. But below the well-known attractions lies a labyrinth, that's a sync word for me, of catacombs, roads, temples, and houses that date back to the fall of the Roman Empire. Because of frequent floods, the citizens of Rome began to build upward and continue to do so for some 3,000 years, covering previous cities as well as their own history. Though a few archaeologists have explored the underground in hopes of finding clues about the ancient city, much of it has remained untouched. According to National Geographic writer Paul Bennett, you can still dig a hole just about anywhere within the walls that once surrounded the city and find something of historical significance. In fact, many of the discoveries to date have been made by accident. In 2008, while a modern rugby stadium was being renovated, an ancient cemetery was found underneath it. You know what? The connection in my mind, the first one too, was what I said about, the white people, colonizers in Seattle, like rebuilding on Duwamish land that was clearly not meant to be habitable for that sort of living. And we go back to what they're talking about, with the Roman Empire, and they did that too. It doesn't mean nobody ever did it before them. I'm sure plenty of humans have done that, but there was a certain point in time, like we used to be migratory creatures. In fact, before the Roman Empire, most human communities were migratory, and they lived with the land. At least most cultures did. Um, it doesn't. I'm also aware there are other timelines where there are those that did settle more so. But if you look historically, a lot of like the earliest human cities and like community spaces were not intended to be there year round because of things like that. Like we didn't force the land to be what we wanted it to be. We went where the land was what we wanted it to be, and etc. We lived more in the similar way that animals and other creatures did. The next one I got is Gemini in reverse. So, Gemini energy, I'm going to say one, this feels like a reversal of reversed Gemini energy, which is such a Geminian thing to say. But it also does feel like it's some of the unevolved Gemini energy. So it feels like Gemini represents the dinner table, the dining room in a house. In my mind, in how I remember that the different houses, it's the third house, and it's like small travels. Like Sagittarius is like, let's go to another continent, whereas Gemini is, let's go to the park kind of thing, or let's go see an auntie, let's go see a grandparent, that kind of stuff. But it's also like, it's supposed to be smaller communications, like when you text somebody, when you email somebody, little things like that, not really in-depth stuff. And it's supposed to be like logical, playful, connected to inner child, things like that, kind of sibling, young love sort of energy. And when it's in unevolved energy, it can be very biting, gossipy, imposter syndrome, savior syndrome, codependence, kind of stuff like that. It's supposed to be interdependence. And so for me, that what I'm feeling from that card being reversed in this moment is that it is a reversal of that unevolved energy, which means growth. And what I got called to on the page that I decided to put this on, this was the last one, is it said the city that rose from the sand. And it seemed connected to the thing that I had, read just the sentence of in the Seattle one, that it was born of the mud. And also, the word rose is a significant for me. I don't know if anybody else. And sand. Now, let's just look at it's the city that rose from the sand and then descended from the desert. Now, it says over the past 50 years, Dubai has transformed from a small trading outpost to one of the most powerful cities in the world. The area's exponential growth can be traced to the investment sense and tenacious imagination of the city's ruling royal family. And then descended from the desert. The area around Dubai is a sparse desert landscape. Over the millennia, oh, there's an ambulance going by. I don't know if that's synchronistic to you or not. The area around Dubai is a sparse desert landscape. Over the millennia, the various nomadic tribes that inhabited the area were involved in trade, especially with nearby India. The modern historical trajectory of Dubai didn't begin until 1833, when 800 members of the Bani Yas tribe made the city an outpost for sea and pearl trading. Descendants of this same tribe still rule the city, but now the family is a constitutional monarchy. And then there's another part in the book. It says transformation takes flight, which I'm not going to read that, but that is very Eight of Wands energy. Whenever I see a plane, I think about Eight of Wands, and I think about telepathy, and I think about communication and projects and things like that. So that might help you as well. Now, I'm just going to leave this juiciness here rather than sitting and interpreting all of it. And I would just love to hear from anybody who wants to put into the comments, like, any synchronicities that came through for you and what it speaks to you about either your personal journey, just like your journey, or you and your twin, or you and family, or you and ancestors, you and history, you and you and unusual knowledge. I don't know. You tell me. And I'll see you in the next video.